The South African Human Rights Commission recommends a moratorium on new liquor licences in the Eastern Cape. In its scathing report released yesterday, the Commission points a finger at police, Buffalo City Metropolitan Municipality and the Liquor Board. For a reaction on this, we're now joined by Lucky Ntimane, convener of the National Liquor Traders. Lucky, good evening. Thanks for your time. How does the National Liquor Traders Association view the SAHRC's proposal for a pause on new liquor licences in the Eastern Cape following the Enyobeni Tavern tragedy?
Thank you so much for the opportunity. Firstly, we'd like to take an opportunity to thank the South African Human Rights Commission for its detailed report, which is something that really will go a long way in providing comfort for the families that have lost their loved ones. I mean, we've had issues where, there was no closure with regards to what actually happened to those kids. And I know that the report does not delve into that, but at least it started a conversation where the families can seek solace in knowing that, their kids were not at fault per se, but that we as liquor traders, for example, as the police, as the liquor board, we ought to have played a much better role to ensure that we protect our kids from demising in an environment that they should not be in the first instance. But we also welcome, the recommendations by the Commission, especially on the moratorium. But I think what it must do, it must bring us into the table to find solutions that are able to help our communities and society, but also not neglect the right of those traders that have got liquor licenses and those that ought to get liquor licenses to be able to get those licenses so that they can trade and support their families. We do, however, understand, that the sensitivity around these deaths in Enyobeni is something that we cannot ignore as a country, and we are standing ready to ensure that we work with civil society, we work with government to ensure that we put into practice the recommendations of the Commission.
Well, okay, before we talk about the implications of the moratorium on liquor licences in the Eastern Cape, just how many licences are issued on average in the Eastern Cape on a monthly basis or on an annual basis?
It will be difficult to give you an exact number because we are not part of the liquor board. Ours is support in terms of liquor traders. But I understand that overall the tavern sector in the Eastern Cape numbers about 7,000, give or take. But nationally, we're looking at about 42,000 taverns. So those are our constituencies that we represent. So if you look at that number, it means that on a monthly basis, on average in the province, we're looking at about less than 20 of those licenses being issued.
So obviously, if it's 20 licenses, and I suppose the Eastern Cape would be a lot smaller in area than Gauteng or the Western Cape, for instance, so those numbers would almost be negligible. I mean, if you're saying we're stopping 5 licenses from being issued, does it have an impact on the business? What is it likely to achieve?
I think the moratorium on issuing of liquor licenses is not really a long-term solution. I think it's a stopgap. I think it allows for us to go back and look at the measures that are being put in place to ensure that we issue licenses to the right recipients. So I think as a conversation starter, we welcome the move that we put the moratorium. But I think as a long-term growth prospects of supporting small businesses in a township that trade as liquor owners, this is not something that is going to provide a positive impact for them. So we feel that let's welcome this as a conversation starter, because any solution that will ensure that we're able to provide a safe, responsible trading environment in South Africa should be welcome wherever it's coming from. But this one, as part of the report that was carried out by the South African Human Rights Commission, which is a body that is tasked by the Constitution to investigate such matters, we need to welcome their recommendations. But we also need to understand that some of these recommendations might not be able to hold water in the long term. But however, we do welcome that they are able to help us to start a conversation in terms of what is it that we need to do to ensure that we've got a safe drinking environment in South Africa.
Well, in a few weeks' time, it's going to be 2 years to the date that these 21 young people lost their lives. So, as the Liquor Association, you've had 2 years to think through some of the challenges and the problems that arose from the Enyobeni Tavern disaster. So, what changes have you made in the last 2 years?
I think the changes that we've seen so far is a relationship that we've developed, close working relationship with the police at the national and also at the provincial level. But I also think, given this opportunity, I would like to commend the Eastern Cape Liquor Board. I know that the report was scathing in their conduct, but I would like to state categorically that the Eastern Cape Liquor Board has done tremendously well in running programs in that province to ensure that they tackle the issue of underage drinking, as well as the pants down events. Almost on a monthly basis in that province, we are seeing programs being rolled out by that authority to ensure that we clamp down on another Enyobeni from happening. So even though, the report does highlight some of the shortcomings from our side. What we're then saying is, let us have an opportunity then to sit around the table and find a solution that will ensure that we work together to ensure that we prevent another Newzroom from happening. And this is only not restricted to the Eastern Cape, but all provinces need to be able to have programs that are running to ensure that we discourage our kids from accessing alcohol when they're not of the right age.
Sorry, like what I'm not getting from you is it's been 2 years since that disaster. You've talked about an awareness program that's occurred in the Eastern Cape, but as far as your membership is concerned, are there policies, are there new ways of doing things since that disaster 2 years ago?
I think maybe we need to understand that at a high level, the liquor trader is governed by license conditions, which comes as part of the issuing of a license for that specific outlet owner, for example. So in the first instance, a liquor trader ought to just follow the basic principles of the conditions of a liquor license. And once they do that, it means then they are trading in a responsible way. So it's nothing over and above beyond what the license provides for that could be introduced. All that the liquor traders need to do is to follow the license conditions. And we've made a plea to police and to our law enforcement partners that those that do not comply with the liquor laws ought to lose their license. Anyone who does not respect their license conditions does not deserve to sell liquor in South Africa.
So in terms of policy, is it that simple? Do you just appeal to the police and say if somebody doesn't obey the law, then their license must be revoked? Surely the process is a little more complicated than that.
Yes, I think the process will be a bit complicated, but if you look at the reality of South Africa, we've got 9 different provinces, which means that we've got 9 different liquor laws. So each and every province has got its own liquor law. Hence, the nuances that we're dealing with in the Eastern Cape, for example, will be slightly different to another province because the laws are not the same. So our appeal would then go directly to those specific provinces to say that the liquor traders that are operating in a specific province ought to follow the laws and regulations that are part of the policy of the issuance of that liquor license to ensure that we all comply. So it is a bit complicated, but we feel that the provinces now have power and authority over in which they can have control over those that are being issued with licenses in their respective provinces.
Look, does the National Liquor Traders Association support the Human Rights Council's, Human Rights Commission's rather, call for comprehensive reforms to protect vulnerable populations and uphold human rights in the context of liquor licensing and regulations? Yes,
we do support that call 100%. We feel that any suggestions that's going to seek to protect our population should be supported. And on record is saying that as liquor traders, we see ourselves as citizens first before we are business people. So any efforts to ensure that we protect the rights of our people should be protected, and we are fully behind the Human Rights Commission stance in that regard.
So here's a question. When you buy alcohol, or in fact, when those that manufacture alcohol advertise, one of the things they say is that this product is not to be consumed or sold to persons younger than 18 years of age. I'm not convinced that this warning is sufficient, right? So what conversations elsewhere should be had? I mean, what conversations should we be having with our kids, for instance, at home or in schools to deter the drinking of alcohol by minors and certainly to drink in moderation?
I think there's always a temptation to want to link the irresponsible use of alcohol and advertising. I mean, we've got societal ills in South Africa that are not governed by advertising. We've got the issue of drugs. Drugs are not advertised on TV, and yet our youth are partaking in drugs. So I think we need to be careful when we start having those engagements. But we're then saying that as parents, for example, as a parent myself, we have a responsibility to teach our kids about the dangers of drinking alcohol. I think we need to be able to nurture our kids outside of enjoyment that has to do with alcohol. I think we glorify alcohol to a certain extent. And I think as parents, we need to take that responsibility to say to our kids that there are better alternatives for having fun outside of alcohol.
Lucky Timana, appreciate your time. Convener of National Liquor Traders, speaking to us on the back of the South African Human Rights Commission's recommendations for a moratorium on new liquor licenses in the Eastern Cape. We'll still